Hello and welcome to the Swallows Charity Head and Neck Cancer Podcast. Join us on a head and neck cancer journey, presented by Derek Luthwaite.
Hello everybody.
And Chris Curtis.
Hello everyone.
We'll be discussing everything that patients and caregivers need to know about diagnosis, treatment, and so much more.
I'm CEO of the Swallows Head and Neck Cancer Charity, and I'm also a cancer survivor for nearly 10 years now.
And I became a caregiver when my wife was diagnosed with mouth cancer, and it certainly put me on a journey that I never expected to experience during my lifetime. Hello everybody and welcome to another of the Swallows podcasts. We're talking head and neck cancer with survivors and patients. Today, I am delighted, despite everything that happens, I am delighted to welcome my bandit, my comrade in arms, Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Derek. It's fantastic to speak to you wonderfully again. I think we've got another patient on today, and also not only that, but a survivor. And not only that, from America. We've still not heard from any of your caregivers yet. Are they all scared to come on or something?
Chris, you always steal my thunder. I was going to give our guest a great big build-up, and you've just absolutely thrown it away for me. But I'm going to try my best anyway.
That's fine.
As has already been alluded, folks, today we are absolutely delighted to have with us Steve Cooper, a laryngectomy survivor from the United States of America. And Steve joins us today to tell us a little bit about the background to his story, but more importantly, he's going to talk to us about dealing with losing your voice, the human impact of losing your voice. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. And it's an honor to be invited to share my story.
We're absolutely delighted to have you. And it just goes to show that the subject we're talking about is not a local subject. It's not a national subject. This is an international, worldwide topic. And we're dragging and talking to people in from all over the world on these particular issues. It doesn't matter whether you're living in the United Kingdom or the United States. If you lose your voice through laryngectomy, cancer issues, you face the same issues. So, Steve, tell us a little bit first about, your life before cancer, and then, the discovery and where it led you to.
For cancer, I was, and I still am, I'm a businessman that has a food brokerage company. I deal with manufacturers, grocery stores. I buy and sell product, and being able to speak, communicate with the vendors, with the suppliers. It's been a good story. Is the essence of what I did. In December of 2008, well, I had a hoarse, my voice was hoarse for a while. And in December of 2018, I finally, after putting it off way too long, went to see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he did a scope, inserted a scope through my nose down and looked into my vocal cords. And he said, oh, you just have a little paralysis, nothing, not a big deal. I'm going to send you to a specialist who can help you work with getting your voice back. No urgency. In fact, if I didn't get the appointment for another 4 or 6 weeks with the specialist, I go to see the specialist. I happen to be at a Johns Hopkins hospital facility in Maryland, United States. And she says, your doctor didn't send the video of the scope. Do you mind if we do another one? I said, no, not by all means. So she had an assistant with her, and the scope goes down your nose and into your throat. And she turns to the assistant and says, do you see what I'm seeing? And right then, the atmosphere in the room completely changed. And so they remove it. And she said, there's something I'd like to take a further look at. I said, doctor, this is your specialty. Is it cancer? And she says, well, until we run some tests, I can't be sure, but That's my fear. So they scheduled a biopsy. Within a week or two, it was confirmed I had stage 4 cancer in the vocal cords. Radiation alone would not have been an option because it invaded the cartilage. And the success rate of radiation alone for that type of cancer is less than 50%. They said I would be back in a year, still facing a total laryngectomy procedure. And then with the prior radiation, the damage would make the operation and the recovery much more complicated. My first thought was, okay, I'm not going to have the surgery. I'll let the cancer run its course. I'm not going to go through this. It's, the idea of losing my voice permanently or losing my voice box or vocal cords permanently, I just couldn't handle at the time. And then, I thought about it in the family and my kids, my wife, and I said, okay, I can do this. I was fortunate enough to connect with others in the laryngectomy community, both online and in person. I attended a local laryngectomy club meeting 2 weeks before my surgery. And that actually was one of the biggest factors that helped me mentally and physically in my recovery. It's well known that and I'm sure it's with with any other cancer, if you have the opportunity to meet someone beforehand that's gone through what you're about to go through, you can see that there will be life on the other side. It was a huge help. February 25th, 2019, I was admitted to Suburban Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just 5 miles outside of Washington, D.C. It's a very good hospital, Johns Hopkins facility, one of the leading hospitals in the United States. They did a bilateral neck dissection and a total laryngectomy. Basically, I was cut from ear to ear. They removed the larynx, rerouted the trachea to come out the neck, separated the trachea from the esophagus. The old story, when you swallow something and it goes down the wrong pipe, it's going into your trachea and you cough. My trachea and esophagus are no longer connected. That's a physical impossibility for laryngectomy. So the procedure, frankly, it's very extensive. It's almost gruesome, to the extent that your body's altered and the extent of the surgery. Standard procedure, I was in the intensive care unit for 3 to 4 days. I was in the hospital for a total of 11 days, and I'm told I actually healed much faster than the normal person. So many of us stay for weeks. I've heard of some staying for months. Once the operation takes place, I'm no longer able to speak. There are several options of voice prosthesis, which is what I'm speaking with now. An electrolarynx, the device you hold under your chin that buzzes, and the movement of your mouth forms the sounds of the words. But initially, immediately after the surgery, you cannot speak at all. So you communicate with a whiteboard, writing with a marker or a pen on a whiteboard or a notebook. Only written communication. There is no speaking. So you can only communicate as fast as you can write or type.
I was just going to ask, Steve, when you woke up for the first time after the operation, I assume there's a human reaction that you want to speak, you want to say something, despite the fact you know you've had your larynx removed, but it's just a human reaction to want to suddenly say, I'm okay, or hello, or I love you, or whatever it may be. Did that happen to you? And how did you deal with it?
So immediately after coming out of the anesthesia, well, basically the next day, the first instinct is to want to speak. You've got the nurses there. You might be in pain. You might be asking for pain medication. You might want to, how did I do? It's odd because opening your eyes, it's like, okay, I'm alive. So that's actually a good thing. But then the instinct to want to talk comes up, and there's nothing there. Another thing about laryngectomies, we cannot cry. I mean, I can have tears, but because of the breathing, we do not cry. It's a silent cry. And frankly, emotionally, that's a tough thing to deal with. So even if you were to want to cry, there's nothing there. Nothing comes out.
I obviously don't have, I haven't had cancer and don't know what you went through, but my wife had mouth cancer and she had half her face removed. When she woke up, she had no jaw, no teeth, and she couldn't speak. And as a relative, a husband, a caregiver, I found it emotionally massively stressful, desperately trying to understand what she was trying to ask me and ask for. And I wanted to do everything I possibly could for her, but I just couldn't understand. Yeah, well, now we had, unfortunately at the time we didn't have a whiteboard, but we did get hold of some paper and pen. But she was in such a bad way from the operation that her handwriting was almost as bad as her lack of voice was. And I found that very, very stressful. And I actually felt guilty that I couldn't understand what she was trying to communicate.
I've dealt with, I don't know how many laryngectomy patients. I've dealt with head and neck patients. And I've learned something today about tears. I never, ever realized that laryngectomy patients struggle to even have that tear and cry. The voice is bad enough. Then to have that as well, I'm just blown away.
I'm getting emotional. You're saying it's true. The tears flow like crazy. Everything, but nothing comes out of the mouth. Zero. It's silence, which adds to you're so upset that you can't even cry. On the plus side, I can't snort. It's impossible because my nose isn't connected. Now, if you have a snoring problem, I wouldn't recommend a laryngectomy as a cure, but
also that's like, I was too heavy before I went into my cancer and I lost 12 stone in weight. It's the best diet in the world, but I wouldn't recommend it.
I've got a question for you, Steve. So you're making a flight over to the UK. You're coming over to visit us, and there's a bit of an emergency in the plane, and the old sign flashes up saying, oxygen, put the mask on.
You know where you're going with this.
So how does that apply?
They bend over and they put it where the sun don't shine.
I always tell people, if you put oxygen on the mouth or nose of a laryngectomy, you might as well be sticking it up his backside because it'll do just the same. It won't do him a bit of good. So the procedure is quite radical. They reroute your trachea, basically where your Adam's apple would be. You literally have a hole in your neck. That's where I breathe. If I need oxygen, that's where it's applied. If you're on a nebulizer, it must be applied. It's called a stoma. Trachea is when they make the hole in your neck, but it's reversible. Once you have if you're a laryngectomy, it's no longer a tracheostomy or a trachea. The same hole in your neck is now called a stoma. And as far as the resuscitation, I've had doctors, when I tell them that my trachea is no longer connected, or my nose or mouth is no longer connected to my trachea. And this is after they said, oh, I'm familiar with laryngectomies. And I tell them they're not connected. 50% of the time, they'll look at you and it's that deer in the headlight look. It's like, How can that be possible? What are you saying? Your trachea is not connected to your nose or your mouth. I've never heard of such a thing. It's very radical. It creates a problem with emergency resuscitation. There's been many, many, many incidents where someone has needed oxygen. The doctor, the hospital, the rescue crew places it on your nose or your mouth. There's been several situations because of that where the patient has died. Because if it's not placed on that little hole in your neck, the stoma, it will not, it cannot go to your lungs. You will not be resuscitated. And it's one of the things as a laryngectomy. And, with the swallows, your mission is outreach and education. As a laryngectomy, how to resuscitate and some of the medical needs of laryngectomies, it's our mission to educate the public and the health profession on some of our unique challenges. After a laryngectomy, there are 3 possible ways that we learn to speak. One is with a voice prosthesis or a tracheoesophageal prosthesis, where they make a small puncture in the trachea, connecting it to the esophagus. They place a small silicone valve about the size of the tip of your small finger. That valve has a flap in it. So when I breathe through the trachea, it goes into my esophagus. I no longer have vocal cords to vibrate, but my esophagus is now vibrating. And that's how I'm producing the sound I'm making. I'm speaking. The other option is an electrolarynx. It's a electronic device that buzzes that you place under your chin. The vibration, you move your mouth just like you're speaking, and that creates the words. And there's a third way, which is esophageal speech. They mistakenly call it burp speech, like you're burping. You draw air in, and then when you exhale it, you form the words. It's like if you had drank a soda pop and then had this long burp, and you mouth something, and you can actually speak. That's how a laryngectomy would have to speak. In my case, I did not have my puncture right away. It was actually 7 months later, which was devastating. But with all laryngectomies, even if you have the puncture, the prosthesis, at the time of the surgery, which is one option, use an electrolarynx. Esophageal speech takes months to learn. It's the toughest. As a result, for a minimum of weeks to months, and some people years, you are unable to speak. You have no voice. You cannot express yourself verbally. Initially, it's strictly written communication.
And this is a situation you found yourself in for quite an extended period of time, only being able to communicate through written communication. And I guess, and again, forgive me because I'm making assumptions here, which I know is wrong, but I don't have the background knowledge to do anything else. I assume that can lead to immense emotional frustration, not only for yourself, Steve, as the patient, but to your family and friends and even work colleagues who are desperately trying to support you, but can't follow sometimes what it is that's required.
Another issue with laryngectomies is 85% of laryngectomies suffer from dysphagia, from swallowing issues. It's a natural result of the surgery. So even swallowing mucus, swallowing water can be a challenge with a laryngectomy. Some laryngectomies are unable to swallow because of extensive damage to the esophagus, and they are tube fed for a short period of time or for the rest of their life on a feeding tube through the stomach. Initially, there's a feeding tube that goes through the nose for every laryngectomy. They don't want you to swallow even water for a minimum of a week for fear that you could tear the stitches out internally by swallowing. The liquid would then go into your lungs. You would aspirate, at a minimum causing severe infection. In severe cases, if I were to go in the water, in a swimming pool or the ocean or a pond, water going into my stoma, I would instantly drown. I'd have about 30 seconds for someone to get me on my stomach, force all the water out of my lungs, or that would be the end.
I just want to ask a silly question, really. I had a feeding peg fitted, and I had it for about 3 years in my stomach. And I remember when the nurse come and took the feeding peg out, I said, "So just stitch it up? What do you do?" And she said, "No, we just leave it open and it closes." So how come your throat with the hole just doesn't do the same? Why doesn't it just close up? Why doesn't it do the same as taking a feeding peg out of your stomach and then you've got a hole in your neck? Our natural body repairs itself and we can't stop it. What stops yours sealing up?
Initially, when you have a laryngectomy, they always insert it's called a laryngectomy tube. It's similar to a trach tube that goes in the stoma and the hole in your neck, and it prevents the hole from closing. If they don't use a laryngectomy tube, you can close up in a matter of weeks. Some laryngectomies, myself, after about 2 months, the doctor said, "Okay, you're doing good. It's not closing. You can stop wearing the tube." Other laryngectomies, if they take their tube out for 12 hours, they struggle to get it back in. That is a very common problem with laryngectomies. And at the beginning, that just as a result of the surgery, it's a problem with every single laryngectomy that has to be watched carefully.
So it's very similar then. Your body will repair itself even though it knows it shouldn't. I mean, I think our bodies are amazing things, and our brains are. When you get cancer and you have to deal with what you're doing, you suddenly realize how clever our bodies are.
What was your cancer, Chris?
Mine was at the base of the tongue. So I had 3 tumors, one each side of the neck and at the base of the tongue. And I was HPV positive. So if you're going to get any cancer, you get my cancer, because more of us survive. And, you know, it is cancer, but these days, because most of us survive, it's almost like, well, it's a cancer, but it's by cancer name only, which I think is great. But what you are left with HPV patients are the quality of life issues after surgery, after everything. So, you know, I think that's the other battle. Yes, I mean, my biggest thing is survivorship is not survivorship without quality of life.
The Swallows Charity Head and Neck Cancer Podcast is designed to help and support both patients and caregivers.
Laryngectomies, there's extensive numbers of lymph nodes in the chin that are on the neck that are removed. And in some ways, the body is miraculous. It will find ways to reroute the lymphatic fluid. Some are better than others. Most laryngectomies will experience lymphedema, or this swelling under the chin for the rest of their lives. But the body does sort of find a way to heal. Now, my voice prosthesis, the small puncture that's the size of about a tip of a pencil between my tracheoesophagus, if that prosthesis dislodges, I've got a couple hours to put a catheter or some other sterile device in that hole, or it will close, and I'll be facing a new surgery. When they change the voice prosthesis, which is painless, they pull it out. They immediately stick a catheter, a spacer in the hole so it doesn't close. And then they prep the new prosthesis and pop it in. It's a 10 or 15 minute procedure. It's done in the office. It's literally painless, but it's one of the risks. If your voice prosthesis should pop out, which is very common to do, you will, though, if you don't address it immediately, we all carry catheters with us, a suction catheter that's good to just stick in the hole. Unfortunately, with some laryngectomies, well, if it pops out and goes into my esophagus, I'm fine. It'll come out. If it pops out and goes into the trachea, I now have a foreign object in my lungs, and it can almost cause you to stop breathing. So that's an immediate trip to the emergency room. This little teeny voice prosthesis, the best way I can describe it, if you've ever used a electronic sewing machine, it's like an empty bobbin.
Yeah.
An empty spool of thread, but it's about the size of a pencil, and it's silicone and it's soft. This little bugger cost me $250. The average life is 3 months. It has to be replaced every 3 months. Plus, I have the additional charge of the speech pathologist, or as you call it, the speech therapist. Insurance reimburses about $100 for the procedure. People complain about the healthcare in other countries until they have a problem. And then they realize what we go through with our health insurance system. It's disgraceful.
Do you know what, Steve? I missed an opportunity because I was in a factory and they're making thousands. I should have got a couple of bags full.
There's a guy in India making them for $1, but I don't know if they're any good.
No.
I would bet, to make this, 50 cents.
Yeah.
The R&D, the marketing, they have an incredibly strong sales force, incredibly strong.
Yeah.
Advertising.
See here in the UK, they can't do that. You know, all our laryngectomy patients will have that on prescription. They don't pay for it.
I mentioned this last about 3 months. Some people go 3 weeks and have to have it replaced. Others can go 6 months, maybe a year, but you don't want to go past that because there's a lot of problems with it in beds. But they make one. I poked this with that little pin. They make one of these with a magnet inside. This size, micro magnet. And that magnet forces it to open or close. It's like an active valve made by Atos.
Yeah.
Or Atos, as you call them. That prosthesis was costing $1,700. It's dropped to about $1,000, $1,200. Problem is, for me and anybody in the US, the insurance reimbursement rates for a voice prosthesis are $100 roughly. So I can go out and get a $1,200 prosthesis that will last me a year, and the insurance company will reimburse me $100.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's why the UK are so lucky. Sorry, Derek.
I hear people all over. I'm jealous. On Facebook, when we talk about our insurance issues, I know people around the world, they're like, what? You got to pay what? Do you know what I pay in insurance? I have to pay private insurance because I'm still working. I'm not on Medicare. And I have my own company. I don't work for another company. The lowest insurance plan, the most cost effective I could find, I pay $500 a month in premiums. But to get that low level, I have a $6,000 a year deductible. So I'm paying $6,000 a year in insurance premiums. Then I have to pay the first $6,000 in medical care. So my insurance costs are a minimum of $12,000 a year if I have anything substantial. People can't afford this. If you're on Medicare or Medicaid, which is the government, when you get to a certain age or certain income level, But for most of us, and I could get another plan, which would cost me about $1,200 a month. And that only has a $2,000 deductible. But now that raises my potential risk to about $16,000 a year before they pay the first time.
Yeah.
Yes, it really does go to show how fortunate we are with our NHS system, which I hold my hand up, and I am amongst those that complain bitterly sometimes at the things that go wrong, but you easily and too quickly forget all the things that they do right and get well. I'd like to go back, Steve, if I may, and I want to ask you, and I want to concentrate. I want to give people hope. I want to give other laryngectomy patients real hope that the news that they are going to lose their voice does not mean the end of life as they know it. It may be a different life, but it's not the end of. How did you overcome? Where did you find the energy, the willpower, the strength to say, listen, I am going to beat you? Okay, for those that are listening, Steve is holding up a little. Okay, this is a fortune cookie, and it says, life is not a matter of holding good cards, but sometimes playing a poor hand well. Well, I lose out on both fronts there, Steve. No, I understand that, and it's a great attitude to have.
A direct answer to your question.
Yeah.
And I sort of this is something that just came to me in the hospital. And we always say this surgery is a game changer. It changes your life. They talk about living a new normal. You adjust to a new normal. It's not normal. We do fine. We're successful. We move on. We become mentors. We return to our old lives. We play golf. But they always use this phrase, it's a game changer, referring to what it does to your life. And I thought about it while I was in the hospital, and I came up with my little mantra. Having laryngectomy surgery, yes, it is a game changer, but I'm still in the game. And I got to be careful, because some people, maybe the extent of their surgery, if it's into their jaw, there might be disfiguration. If I had to have my esophagus rebuilt, they take a muscle from another part of your body, your leg, your arm, your chest, and they call it a flap. They rebuild your esophagus. That takes months to heal. It's devastating. And emotionally, and physically, you don't do quite as well. I was not always this most, positive person with the most positive outlook. It's very common when you have an adversity, a couple of things can happen. I was fortunate. It got turned into a positive. Community involvement, caring for others. Life is short. A lot of it I attribute to meeting laryngectomies before my surgery. And that's the doctors, laryngectomies, the community that's involved will agree. That is one of the biggest factors in recovery, both physically and mentally, and as far as your attitude. I was never one of these high energy, positive on life people. So after the surgery, a couple of things could have happened. I didn't want to look back. I just wanted to move forward. Frankly, something that was crazy, at 10 weeks after my surgery, I attended the International Association of Laryngectomees at their annual conference in Phoenix, Arizona, about 2,000 miles away. Me with no voice and no ability to communicate other than written. Booked a ticket and plane ticket and hotel tickets. And I flew to Arizona to attend this conference to be with several hundred other laryngectomies. That was one of the extremely positive things that helped me in this path. And backing up. Initially, I was supposed to have radiation, but during the surgery, the lymph nodes that were removed, they all tested clear, no cancer whatsoever. I was strictly refined to the larynx, the voice box. My cancer was strictly in the larynx of the voice box, and they decided after taking my case to a tumor board, which is what they do at Johns Hopkins Hospital. They tell me it's roughly 30 doctors and oncologists. They decided I could forego radiation. So that's one of the things that also allowed me to recover more quickly. So each one is different, depends on your procedure, depends on your recovery, and it depends on the support around you.
Before we finish, I've got three things I want to ask, because over here in the UK, we're starting to, and the Swallows is starting to look at voice banking for people. So where they can bank their voice before the operation, and then we can use that voice going forward if we have to use it. So what's your thought on voice banking?
Voice banking is a phenomenal concept. In my case, my voice was so, well, first of all, let me back up. I had not heard of voice banking prior to my surgery. Once I heard about it, frankly, I was a little depressed that that wasn't an option or something that I knew about. Very few people know about it. The education, even with the doctors and the surgeons, the education, it needs improvement. So voice banking, yes, if it's available, if you can do it, it's phenomenal. Unfortunately, as good as it is, it's just not that well known or understood. I would bet no more than 5%. If it was 10%, I'd be surprised. But no more than 5% of the laryngectomies have the opportunity or the knowledge of voice banking.
So is that a cost or an awareness?
It's awareness, strictly awareness. It's education. The doctors, not completely, but their biggest concern is curing the cancer. It's making the cancer go away. They often lose track of what it does to you emotionally. And that's where voice banking can help. I was extreme. It was about 6 months later, 5 months later, I was really depressed. I said to myself, okay, you've got to go get some help. I think it was the first day meeting the therapist, the psychologist. I'm sorry, that's what I was looking for. But after writing some things, telling her how upset I have become, she said, Steve, you're in mourning. Our voices are our personalities. Our voices are who we are. You have lost your voice. You have lost who you are. You are in mourning over the loss of you. And at first I looked at her and I'm like, what kind of nonsense is that? And then it hit me. She was right. That's one of the frustrations with not being able to speak. Can you imagine going to a party, wanting to contribute, and having to sit there with your lips closed and not being able to say a word? How frustrating, how isolating, how devastating that could be.
You're listening to the Swallows Charity Head and Neck Cancer Podcast.
So the other thing before we wrap up, I really want to talk about is you're in the US. Swallows is here in the UK. Why do you think it's important that we collaborate around the world to do what you do with your group, what I do with our group, and what Derek does with carers? You know, why is it so important that we all talk together on a global basis? And what do you think about the Swallows and the work that we do? Then I'll let Derek close up.
whatever issues you're having, whether it's cancer, emotional, physical, we're all in this together. It's not what we go through in the US, what you go through in the UK, what you go through in Australia. We're all in this together. Joining together the education, the support. When you're down, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups. 24 hours a day, I can go into Facebook and talk about a problem. I know the Swallows has a support line that can be accessed anytime. Being one, we're all in it to help each other. And so, fortunately, especially with today, with Zoom and the, ability to communicate online, it's a push of a button and you can be talking or helping someone. I'm in the United States. I connected with someone in Lebanon 2 weeks ago whose mother was facing laryngectomy surgery. She did not want to have the surgery. She was only 54 years old. She was adamant. She did not want to have the surgery. She'd rather die, which is actually a very, very common first reaction. I connected with her through Facebook and messaging and emails. And it was such a relief. It's similar to when I've mentored laryngectomies where the doctor would call me in and say, look, Steve, you got to talk to them because they're refusing the surgery. They're in the hospital now. They can't breathe. And and that's where the mentoring is so important. And groups like the Swallows. I met with a person, his wife was there. And he was in the hospital. He couldn't breathe. They had a trach tube in him. And after about an hour and a half, he grabs my hand and he places his finger over the trach. He says, Steve, before this, I was ready to check out. He says, after talking to you, and I could be anybody. I could be a laryngectomy patient. I could be a breast cancer patient. I could be anything. He said, after talking with you, he says, I got this. I can do this. And that was one of the most heartfelt, those episodes. And I know you deal with this every day at the Swallows. Those episodes, that's what life is all about. If we can impact one person, our meetings, if we can impact one person, we've done a good job. And I mentioned the Swallows. I'm a board member with the International Association of Laryngectomees in the US. I was a past board member with Web Whisperers, which is one of the largest, it's the largest laryngectomy group in the world. I've been following the Swallows for quite some time, frankly, through a friend. I was introduced to the Swallows through a friend and, frankly, one of the leaders in our community, Jim Lauder. And he said, Steve, you got to join in their Zoom meetings. And it was maybe a year ago. It was phenomenal. Chris, Derek, what you all have put together at the Swallows is unparalleled. It's the finest support group I've ever seen. And I really want to commend you on that. And it's inviting, know-it-all, know-nothings like me, to share our stories from around the world that's evidence of what your outreach is, how far your reach can go, your sincerity, and your intent to help cancer patients all over the world. And never ask for a dime. I know donating to the Swallows is very important. You have a large operation, a large budget, but that's not what drives it. It's your innate need to help other people. And for that, the world is truly a better place.
I never, none of us at the Swallows do it for that. But when we hear someone say that, it's incredible. I generally say it an awful lot. The day I was given cancer was the day I won the lottery, because I certainly wouldn't be sat here talking to yourself from the States and doing podcasts with the wonderful Derek. And, even John, does all our technical side. I've met some wonderful people since I got diagnosed cancer. And I think when you do something for passion and not money, doors don't stay closed. Doors get opened. And, it isn't about the money. Yeah, we all need money to survive. Yes, we all need money as a charity. But at the end of the day, it's about the support comes first. The money comes second. And yeah, you can't pay me enough money when someone says, do you know what? You got me through that treatment.
Okay, Steve, I believe you are contactable through Web Whispers. Would you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, if you go to the website, webwhispers.org, not .com, webwhispers.org, and at the top you click on About Us, and then you will see Meet Us. You will see my name, Steve Cooper, with my picture. If you click on that, the email will go directly to me personally. And I'd be happy if anybody had any questions, concerns, or wanted to reach out to me for any reason. I'm available through that site.
That's fantastic, Steve. Thank you so much. And I believe you've got one or two Facebook accounts that you can also point us in the right direction with.
Larry's Speakeasy is the biggest one of the laryngectomy groups. Their mission is to give free laryngectomy supplies to those who need. Their sole mission. Phenomenal group. Laryngectomy support. Web Whispers on Facebook. And then we get into some smaller ones to stop it. And then there's two strictly for head and neck cancer. Head and neck cancer survivors Facebook group. And throat and oral cancer survivors Facebook group.
I saved the most important question to the end of this podcast, Steve. So here goes. How important was it for you to have friends and family support during your time of relearning your personality?
It's funny, as you're asking me that question, and before you got to the friends and family, I was thinking, I haven't even mentioned my friends and family and local support group. After my roughly 11-hour surgery, I'm in the recovery room. I just come out of anesthesia, and they bring my wife back.
Folks, it's a very emotional topic we're covering here. Steve's handling it as best as he can, and it's obviously important to him.
And they bring my wife into the recovery room, and I kind of looked to the side, and I saw her walking towards me, and I knew I would be okay. That was with all the fears and everything we go through. That was very, very special to me. Friends and family were so crucial in my recovery. And as a carer or a caregiver, we tend to really take things out on the people closest to us. We're going through some, can't talk, frustration. We've got people there who give their, in addition to the hard work they have to take care of us, they're going through the emotional impacts of seeing their loved ones suffer. And we tend to forget, it's not all about me, woe is me. I'm the worst at it. and we unload on those closest to us. Thank God for them and the support that we get from friends and family. Without that, this would be a tremendously difficult road, tremendously difficult journey.
Thanks, Steve, for summing that up. I think it's without any exaggeration, it's fair to say that the cancer patient may be suffering from the disease, but the family, the group, the friends are all part of the package, and they go through just as much emotional distress as the individual who's suffering. So it's great to know that they're there and that they can be called upon and you can rely on them, and they'll move heaven and earth to give you what they think is right for you. So yeah, God bless our friends and family.
And on that note, that's another thing that I've noticed the Swallow does is the caregiver support group. There is one Facebook group called Caregivers for Laryngectomy Support Group. Caregivers is 2 words. Laryngectomies are not allowed to join. It's for caregivers only. It's a safe space where the caregivers can talk and their problems and look for solutions and commiserate amongst each other.
Well, thanks very much, Steve. It's been wonderful talking to you today. You've given us an insight to the difficulties, both physically and mental, that laryngectomy cancer patients suffer with, and have to overcome. And hey, listen, I'm pretty sure that we'll find a reason to talk to you and or some of your friends over in the States again in not too distant future. So on behalf of the Swallows, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Steve Cooper. Take care of yourself, look after yourself, stay well, keep in touch, and we'll do the final wrap up if that's okay. You've heard a lot from me today. You've heard far too much from Chris already, but I have to ask him to wrap it all up for us, Chris, with the usual advert, please.
Normal advert. Yeah, if you want to contact us, it's www.theswallows.org.uk. And if you want to obviously email us, info@theswallows.org.uk. We've also got our 24/7 phone number, which is 07504 725 059. And contact us through Twitter or one of our many Facebook pages. Derek, wonderful again.
Okay, everybody. Thank you very much for listening into this podcast. If you've enjoyed it, tell your friends, tell your family. We'll be back with another topic and another subject in the not too distant future. So send us a like, send us a message, tell us what you think of our stories, our podcasts, our guests. And if there's something specific that you would like us to include in the program, we'll do our very best to provide it. Take care of yourself from me, and good night.
You've been listening to the Swallows Charity Head and Neck Cancer Podcast. For more information, please visit www.theswallows.org.uk. We hope you'll join us again next time.